This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Questions about NIL? Want answers about Chaz Linear and the basketball team? We'll try and provide answers in our Q&A show next. Welcome into our Q&A show. I'm John Pennington, joined by Jimmy Hyams, Chuck Cavalaris, Ryan Callahan, guys that you know from the Sports Source. The Q&A show is where simply I take some of the questions that you have sent in, and I will invite you to send them into SSDN Questions. That's Sports Source Digital Network, questions@gmail.com. Send us questions there. We'll try and answer them. We'll do this every couple of weeks or so and see what we can come up with in terms of answers for you. Here on the Sports Source Digital Network, we've got all kinds of content. Check out some of the other programs. We're up to 15 or so shows now in about 2 weeks. So we're cranking out the content. If you like it, click the subscribe button. That's how other Tennessee fans around the country can find a channel like this. Leave a comment if you got another question, or if we answer in such a way that you disagree or you think we've confused you more, comment there. If you think you got a better answer than we do, comment. Hit like, hit notify, hit all the good things for the Sports Source Digital Network. All right, gentlemen, I have not really curated these. We're just going to kind of read them as we go. You guys haven't seen them. There's one that I threw out, but the others you don't know. Let's see. Well, and we'll start with it. Let's play the what if game. This is from Bruce Jansen, Elkmont, Alabama. Bruce, thanks for watching us on our other YouTube channel. If you want to see the Sports Source every Sunday, click the other Sports Source channel, Sports Source #1 and Sports Source Digital channel, Digital Network. All right, Bruce Jansen, Elkmont, Alabama. Let's play the what if game. Say you were the head coach of the University of Tennessee. If you had the ultimate budget and could get anyone you wanted, name your staff. I want coordinators and position coaches. Okay. I'll just say this. I don't have a problem with Tim Banks as your defensive coordinator right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can go get somebody better, I get it, and that's what he's asking. But I don't really feel like replacing Tim Banks. I think he's the reason you're in the playoff this year.
What wasn't the thought that because of Tennessee's up-tempo offense that the defensive numbers were going to stink?
Yeah.
And then the last 2 years, the defense in 5 different major categories is ranked among the top 5 in the SEC. That's pretty darn good. This team didn't win 10 games because of its offense this past year.
No.
Right.
It won 10 games because the defense was really good.
I think too much is made out of, do you have the best staff in the country or just a good staff? Sometimes you're as good as your talent is. Like Ohio State's coordinators are probably seen as really good coordinators. Chip Kelly just left because they've got some of the best talent in the country. Alabama was always in the same boat. All those guys got chances to be head coaches for a reason.
And Alabama stayed good even though they would just keep rolling guys in and out every year.
So a lot of times you're no better than your players. So I think some of that's overrated. And to your point, you're just fine with Tim Banks. I think you're just fine with Rodney Garner on the defensive line. There's 2 I wouldn't change probably because you're just fine. And if you're in that discussion where you've got one of the 10 best defenses in the country as Tennessee is, why would you change much?
Yeah, I mean, and you just went through a 2 or 3 week period where you thought you might lose Tim Banks, right?
Yep.
And then if you did lose him, wasn't in your Big Ten, go back to where he had coached before. So, no, I mean, I definitely think you want to keep him because they've showed gradual improvement in a lot of categories every year.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing is, this is saying if you are Tennessee's head coach. All right. Are we going to do this as if you're Josh Heupel? Or is it if you were? Let's do it as if you're Josh Heupel.
That was my question, too, because
then your offensive coordinator, you're kind of handcuffed in getting somebody that runs your system. And a lot of those guys have now moved up to being head coaches.
Yep.
Can Alex Golish wash out at USF and you can bring him back? I don't want to crap all over Joey Halzle.
Yeah.
But there has been maybe it's players, but there has been a downturn the last 2 years. I don't think they've been as up-tempo the last 2 years. I don't think they've been as creative the last 2 years.
Right.
Now, maybe that's the thing you say when you don't have the players, too. Ryan's right. But offensive coordinator, I don't want to change Heupel's system he's not going to change it. So I don't know of a guy that runs that system that I would go after. Do you have one?
No, but I would go for a recruiter at that position maybe, and I mentioned this name earlier. I would go with him even though he just got a promotion. Brian Hartline at Ohio State. He's a great recruiter, has put out a ton of great receivers at Ohio State. They're kind of known as the wide receiver factory. Maybe a guy like that where someone who can complement what Heupel does, but knowing he's not going to overhaul the offense, that would be a good fit, I think.
And I also think it wouldn't hurt. I've kind of dinged him a little bit on the television show. On the defense, he's gone outside and brought people in. On offense, when somebody's left, he's just promoted from within.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think it hurts to have some new blood, not a total change of system, just a different pair of eyes to say, hey, what if we threw this into the offense?
Right, exactly. And I think I think if you look at this, are you tempo or not tempo? There seemed to be last year some indecision, or maybe our tackles can't hold up if we want to go as fast as we want to go. I think that's really the first thing they need to look at. That are we tempo or are we not tempo? You're still going to go 2 by 2 most likely on your wide receivers. But I think there's some areas they could look at and at least tweak a little bit.
Alex Golish was new blood. And
Right.
I thought he did a really nice job. I'm not going to say so much about play calling because I think Heupel did it initially and then Golish took over. That's a little bit of ambiguity. But every game you watch Tennessee play, it seemed like, they would run some play that got somebody wide open. And it wasn't against Kent State. It was against Alabama. Alabama couldn't figure it out. Some other teams couldn't.
More motion.
More
They would
motion.
guys.
Or they would stack Jalen Hyatt with Brew McCoy, and then they would crisscross, and they'd be wide open. I don't see that as much the last 2 years.
Now maybe that's Hyatt special, but still there should be a weak link on the other secondary and take your best guy and move.
Right.
That's what they did. Not only did they stack Hyatt, but Alabama had a safety that they wanted to attack all day. If Hyatt's on the left, he's suddenly moving on the right because that's where this guy's lined up. I agree with you. I haven't seen a lot of that. And you go back to that Ohio State game, Chip Kelly came out and just motioned them to death.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think that may be one where I'm still worried. You can take this two ways. Heupel isn't a do what he does, do what you do coach because he's been willing as an offensive guy to lean on his defense. 2 years ago, he was still going for it on fourth down midway through the season and putting his defense in awful space. And we talked about on the television show, if you're going to win with defense, you got to stop that. You got to stop thinking like an offensive guy. And he did. Yep. So that impressed me. However, when it comes to his offense, they do seem to be, he may be big picture, I don't have to just win this way, but when it comes to his offense, I don't know, you don't really have a counterpunch. If the tempo's not going, I don't know what you got.
And guys, so many teams in the playoffs that I was watching this, there was like a shift. There's a shift a lot of times with the tight ends, and then there's motion, and then sometimes you attack going the other way. That's what I don't think you see with what Tennessee is doing. And I think that's something, when you see other teams do it to Tennessee's defense, whether it's an RPO or whatever it is, you wonder why Tennessee can't do more of what you're saying. Yeah. Get your best receiver, like Steve Spurrier used to do all the time, right? Yeah. Get your best receiver on the weakest cover defensive back.
Here's the thing that concerned me about Tennessee this past year. They averaged 62 points a game against non-conference opponents. But in SEC games, they average about 27. Okay? So your offense, you're going to tear up teams that aren't very good. And I know NC State was supposed to be a good opponent. They ended up not being that good.
Right.
But that's a heck of a disparity. So to me, when I look at the final offensive numbers, I'm not as impressed with what they show because you didn't get it done in conference games.
And guys, here's one more. Those offensive numbers, what were they on the road in the SEC games?
Oh, wow, yeah.
You're averaging less than 13 points a game, right? Yeah. When you go on the road in the SEC. Is that because you're a running offense? And then when that stopped, you don't really have any. But I don't know what it is, but they've got to figure that out.
Well, I also wonder, and I guess you could make this case that it didn't hurt Ole Miss's offense with Jackson Dart, but you do have more offenses in this league running this offense now. And I always thought you don't want that. You don't want everybody because you want to be the team that it's special to prepare for you.
Yes.
It's like, oh, hell, we haven't seen any of this. They're running 100 miles an hour. We got to practice. But if you're facing Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Oklahoma used to run it, but you got more teams that are running similar styles, versions of this veer and shoot. Does that help you at all? I don't think it can. I think it can hurt you.
Yeah, I think I definitely think it's a negative for Tennessee that maybe a few more teams are using it. Now, I still don't think this is a widely used offense throughout college football.
Correct.
But the one
when 3 out of 16 teams in your league at least are using shades of it.
Variations of it, yeah. So I think that does hurt probably. And I think I think part of it might be the SEC adjusting. I mean, since Steve Spurrier, basically, what offense have we seen come into the SEC that's been unstoppable for 3 years or more? It doesn't happen often. This league tends to adjust pretty quickly. I think we've seen more teams playing two deep safeties. They give that blitz look and then bail on the blitz. There are things that other teams have sort of figured out. The 3-3 look was one that has given Tennessee problems at times. There have been some wrinkles that I think have slowed Tennessee down, especially when you have the talent up front to do it.
Mississippi State runs it too, by the way.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, it doesn't matter because of the players they got.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress there.
But they've gone out and hit the portal hard this year. It would be interesting to see if Lebby takes a step forward with that offense this year.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yep.
Let's get back to this guy's question that we haven't answered. I have a feeling that's going to be the beauty of the Q&A show. We just kind of ramble.
Yeah.
But Ryan, you cover recruiting. So let's take it from a recruiting standpoint. You mentioned Brian Hartline. Are there any other coaches out there, position coaches, who you would say, here's a guy to go grab? Because I know what you're going to say, and I want you to dive into this, that NIL has changed the necessity of recruiters. But I'll also say everybody seems to think Tennessee's money, their NIL dollars, is as good as anybody. It's way up there. If that's the case, shouldn't your recruiting classes be better than 10th to 11th to 12th to 13th? I think they should be, which tells me you may have NIL, but could you get better recruiters to work with the NIL? But you tell me, NIL and then assistants.
Yeah, so here's the problem with that. Tennessee's NIL money situation is fine. It's just that a lot of other schools are in the same boat, and the money is leveled out to the extent that Tennessee no longer has an advantage there.
Right, but
they're just able to keep up.
But you're not getting dwarfed by many teams.
Yeah, exactly. So hardly anyone, I would say. I mean, the Ohio State number that $20 million last year caught a lot of people's attention. I don't think Tennessee was far off that number. So you've got a chance to be competitive when you're in that discussion, but it's just your money is as good as anybody else's, and then it comes down to who do you prioritize. You're going to win some battles, but you can't win all of them. So I think they're doing fine for where they are. But, yeah, to your point, recruiters can help in some situations. There are some cases where it would help to have an elite recruiter. Maybe gets you in the door with a guy that wouldn't otherwise look at you, or gives you an advantage when it's a tight race with someone. But otherwise, most players are going where they want to go because of your ability to put players in the NFL and where's the money.
Right.
And if you're winning on those two fronts, the position coach tends to matter a bit less in this era. So I would say it still helps. That's why I would still hire a guy like Brian Hartline. Tashard Choice, running backs coach at Texas, has a good reputation. But again, is that because he's at Texas or because he's a great recruiter who would be good anywhere? That's
where players good because of his coaching, or is he good because of the players he's got?
It's hard to separate. He's a great recruiter, but is that because he's at Texas and has a great program to sell? And then other guys like that, Travaris Robinson has been a successful recruiter at multiple stops. Corey Raymond, as secondary coach, has been good at multiple stops in the SEC. I would probably hire those guys. And I think Tennessee, sure, they can upgrade their recruiting ability at some positions on the staff, no question. But you've got to value coaching in this era too, because it's all about development, retention, getting your players to max out their potential. I think Tennessee's got some guys on staff where you'd say they're not great recruiters, but they're good coaches, and that means something in this era.
Here's the part of recruiting too: it's evaluating.
Yeah.
And Tennessee, in a couple of positions, in my opinion, is not evaluated very well.
I think that's fair.
Receiver and offensive line.
Bingo. Those are two.
They've developed guys they inherited.
Right.
They have brought in no one and then developed them.
Right.
Yes.
To an NFL level.
So I would say the recruiters are valuable in that they can evaluate. So that's what I want. I want somebody that doesn't have a lot of misses.
One thing I would do, guys, I would look at the staff of who you need to beat. And I think that starts with Georgia. And I would look at their secondary coach. And I would look at some of their coaches that have really produced talent. And they've lost some good coaches in the past 2 or 3 years. But if I'm at Tennessee, I'm looking at the teams you have to beat and finding their best recruiter and best coach and seeing if he wants to talk.
That's one interesting thing about Josh Heupel that I'm interested in seeing. We're going into year 5 now. We've yet to see him really make a change on his own to this staff.
Right.
He's let guys leave, but he's not run off anybody.
It's very Fulmer until Randy Sanders, until he had to throw somebody to the Wolves. And he really didn't make any changes.
And I think that's fine to an extent. And when things are going well, it's hard for coaches to make themselves make changes. But Butch Jones fell into that trap, and he didn't make changes until things were already kind of spiraling downhill. And by then it was too late, and the changes made things worse probably. So there's a risk in having turnover. You want continuity, but I think there's also a risk of keeping guys that you're comfortable with and not getting better all the time.
It's the difference between continuity and stale.
Yeah.
I think adding somebody with just a fresh pair of eyes every now and then. Maybe it's a tight ends coach who runs a completely different offense that you're bringing in. I'm not knocking anybody specifically here. I'm just throwing out a position coach. One interesting thing is when this staff got here, how many fans were saying, oh, yeah, this staff looks great? Yeah. And yet you've won 30 games the last 3 years. If you've made a New Year's Six Bowl, which 3 years ago would have been a playoff bid. So you made the playoffs this year. 30 wins, 2 playoff bids. If you had the same system in 3 years, so when you look at this staff and you're saying, there's no great names there, somebody's getting the job done.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that's national championship level. You can always get better. I keep going back to nobody is blowing you away at NIL. Okay, great. Then why are you always at number 10 at best, and then you got all these other teams that are at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they're competing for titles? That's where I come back to, could you use some aces in recruiting? I just wonder how much of it. Rodney Garner had a great reputation as a recruiter the first time he was here. It was 20 years ago or 25 years ago.
Yeah.
How much of it is he beating down the recruiting paths anymore, or is he more of a closer when you get him on campus kind of guy?
Yeah, I think that's probably more his role at this point. And again, it's just different now. There's only so much of an impact the Trooper Taylors and those guys can have these days when it all comes down to who's paying you the most and where can you get to the NFL. That's what I was going to say about that, getting into the top 5. There are no shortcuts now. It's hard to get up there unless you are just paying an exorbitant amount for your recruiting class or you are just putting a lot of guys in the NFL. Tennessee's got to keep.
Maybe that's it.
Winning helps, but Tennessee still doesn't have the reputation of a school that's putting loads of players in the NFL. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, they're always up there. They're always up there in the recruiting rankings because they have high draft pick numbers.
That's why they should be all over Trey Smith. They should be praying that Darnell Wright continues to progress. Byron Young.
They need stars in the NFL. That's what Tennessee, Peyton Manning and Jason Witten and Eric Berry got them a long way. They haven't really had. Alvin Kamara has been their biggest name in the NFL for the past 10, 12 years.
The Hendon Hooker situation isn't helping.
Yeah. Jalen Hyatt didn't help.
No.
So far,
and Cedric Tillman looked a little better when they finally got Deshaun Watson out of there, but even you're not looking at it saying, well, he's spectacular. There aren't a lot of guys who are tearing it up, and the problem with Trey Smith's one of the best linemen. Darnell Wright looks like he's on the right trajectory. It's offensive lineman.
Yep.
So that may catch offensive linemen's eyes, but it's not those other position players. If you have Peyton Manning, everybody knows what Tennessee's doing because he's a Tennessee guy.
Yep.
How much am I paying attention to Darnell Wright being a Tennessee guy if I'm a receiver somewhere?
Yeah, most of the name recognition is former Vols, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you look around the league, one thing we did mention, Josh Dobbs, and he keeps showing that he can pick up an offense, but he doesn't seem to stay in the same place very long.
Juwan Jennings has gone to that level, so maybe that's a guy that you can start pointing to. You just need to have him. Don't get thrown out of games for fighting, Juwan.
But see, this is their problem. Mid to late round draft picks and not guys who are household names. You need more early round draft picks and household names. That's what Alabama and Georgia are able to sell. That's been the biggest differentiator for them. Alabama used to send out graphics every year telling how many dollars in signing bonuses their draft picks got. I mean, that's powerful to these players who are looking to make money because that's ultimately all these players. I mean, fans get sort of upset by the idea that players are just seeking money and just looking for that. At the end of the day, all these guys, NIL aside, they want to get to the NFL where the big money is. Right. And so that's what these guys are all looking for. And I don't think there's any shortcuts in this era to that. It's NIL or get me to the NFL.
We spent about 20 minutes on that guy's question. And
sorry,
Bruce, we answered pieces of it.
I gave you some names.
Thanks for watching, Bruce. Appreciate it. Here's another one. Jason Vance says, is it possible for the NIL collectives to add verbiage to their contracts that equate to buyout clauses? They're private businesses, so if a kid wants to leave before the term of the NIL contract is up, they'd be on the hook for some buyout money. That's totally independent of any NCAA transfer rules around number of transfers, transfer window limits, etc. Seems like a way to put some guardrails up temporarily until something can be formulated nationwide.
So
absolutely, you can do it, but who's going to sign with you?
Yeah, really.
Well, so I actually asked this question recently because there was someone at another team site that referenced that the school they cover had started to do this in some of their NIL deals, and it helped them retain some players this offseason. I was like, is this a thing? Is that happening? Is that something other schools could do if that's true? And the response I got was, you could try it, but it wouldn't really be enforceable. You can't make the contracts pay for play, which is part of the problem. And even if someone did try to get, or you did try to get someone to abide by that buyout, you're going to take them to court for it. I mean, it would be a long, drawn-out process, and you might lose anyway.
And then recruits are going to see you taking a player to court.
Right.
And that's not going to work.
So the answer I got essentially was not really, not in a binding way that really matters.
And I wonder if it would work in a league like the SEC.
Yeah.
I mean, the team that's doing it, was it in the SEC?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that surprises me. This is such a cutthroat league.
But
I'm shocked that
that's why I was surprised to hear it, because it's not something you've heard a lot.
And we got to remember too, the collectives are making an investment, right?
Yeah.
They're making an investment as like you're buying talent, not just for the college, but even down the road in a lot of cases. So you want that player to stay where they are most times, right?
Yeah. See,
That's where your money's tied up.
now you're getting into another angle of this whole. And we'll do this on another day. But I'm
still,
always interested.
I mean, just answer what you're saying about
the
having
collectives don't open their books, and I think that's
right.
I don't like things when the books aren't open.
That's why I don't think you could really get what the question was.
Yeah.
Can you get that to where there's a buyout or there's a penalty, which seems like there should be.
And again, if you did, even if you could pull that off, here's what's going to happen in most cases: players aren't going to want to be tied to that, so they're going to go to the second place school that's offering them $50,000 less. Right. What's $50,000 compared to my freedom to have leverage in the offseason?
The majority of Tennessee athletes that have more than 1 year of eligibility left, I'm told, have multi-year contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're not binding. So what does it matter? If Nico decided, I got to, whatever his deal is, 3 years, 4 years, and he decides, okay, I want to go to Miami because they're going to pay me more than Tennessee, he can go.
Now, here's where it matters. The collective is binded to those terms. The player is not, though. So if a player stinks and they're tied to a great deal and they just want to make the money, you still owe them that money.
You can't undo that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, we went 100 years and it was all geared against the players, and now everything is geared toward the player.
That's
a hell of a shift.
That's what I think fans don't like. It feels like too radical of a shift. Schools used to have
Probably is.
Schools used to have the ability to limit where players could transfer. You had to sit out a year to transfer. I mean, there were so many things that were against the player, and now it's all player friendly.
When's the last time you heard anybody mention the words NCAA clearinghouse?
Yep.
That used to, everything, does he have enough hours? Oh, we got to pass the clearinghouse. Why is the clearinghouse taking forever? Now these guys are willy-nilly all over the place. I don't think, the one case to watch right now is the kid from Wisconsin. I forget his name. Kid from Wisconsin signed a deal with Wisconsin. His agent said, well, that's contingent on the house settlement. They hadn't paid him anything else, so we're going to Miami. And Wisconsin's all up in arms saying, we got a deal. And he's off to Miami. And the thing is, he did it outside the transfer window. They said, he told them, put me in the transfer window. They said no. He left anyway. And the NCAA, when asked about it, said, what do you want from us? We can't stop a kid from leaving.
You can unenroll when you want to.
You can unenroll and enroll somewhere else and play immediately.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're
scary.
just here now. We have nothing to. What's to stop a guy from doing that every other week?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to tell me, because I'm guessing Miami's a good school.
Mm-hmm.
How much do we think they were really interested in checking this kid's academics coming out of Wisconsin? Because he sure moved like that. So the days of, well, are his grades in order? And I know people used to laugh at
Satisfactory
that.
progress.
Yeah, I know that people. We've always laughed at that, but now I think there was something there. I do think it wasn't just completely the biggest guys. You'd look the other way on. Okay,
Right.
Now I just think they're. You want to come in and play? Fine. We don't. How many hours you get? Don't ask him about his hours. We don't care. What's he majoring? We don't care. Does it transfer? We don't care.
Well, now I will say there are situations where that's still an issue. There was a cornerback Tennessee had some interest in. Kendrick Breedlove started his career in the SEC. He's on his fourth school now. Was committed to Arizona State. They were going to try to flip him in January, and he didn't have some of his credits from one of his previous stops didn't transfer to Tennessee. And sometimes you also have guys who are 3.5 years into their college career. You're too close to graduating to transfer, so you have to go ahead and graduate before you can actually transfer.
And then be a grad. Yeah. The only thing that makes me say is, what's wrong with you, Tennessee? You let them boys in.
Well, just a quick thing on this, and I know that we talked about it wasn't in the athlete's favor, and now all of it is. I will say this: if you got a college scholarship and it paid for your education, that's still pretty good. Okay.
Well,
so I don't snub my nose at that. So at least you had that, and it gave you a lot of people that couldn't afford it. Now I'm not saying I'm against paying them right now. I'm just saying that I just think that the value of a scholarship is like nobody seems to care about that.
Right, I don't think they do.
Right.
I don't think players look at that because most of them think they'll be in the NFL.
Yeah.
Well,
The reality is many of them have fallen back on that scholarship they got and that education they got and had to do something else. But I've never talked to a player who said, I'm so happy that I got room and board. And never.
But you should, because how many ever make it in the NFL?
I agree with you.
What, 2% or something?
I think
it has value. Yeah. The problem is they look at the luxury suites being sold. They look at coaches getting paid $10 million. They look at the TV deals for $50 million and all this stuff. They're saying, why don't I get a cut of that? So that's the problem is they see $50,000 in scholarship money compared to what these guys are.
And if you're
billions.
fortunate to have at least 20 schools recruiting you or more,
yeah,
you're going to get a scholarship somewhere. You're going to get an education somewhere. So that kind of it just kind of gets pushed to the side.
But how
much you going to pay me?
But how many of those guys, they're going to a football factory.
Yeah.
They're going to football school. I don't think hotel management.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, while you're saying there is value, but if you're recruiting my son,
I agree.
I've got 20 offers for my son, and he's going to get an education at a lot of good schools, then it comes down to how much you're going to pay us or pay him.
My point was, and I wasn't clear on it, 20 years ago, I'm saying it wasn't that bad.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
For athletes, because they were getting their education paid for.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sit here and think, okay, well now finally. No, you had a free education. So there should have been some value in that, as opposed to looking at it like these were indentured servants.
You're correct. You're absolutely correct. Of course it mattered, and of course it counted. I don't think they ever thought it did.
Right.
I don't think the majority of players go into school, the majority of top 10 players don't go in saying, oh boy, football's great, but I really want to get my education. I just don't think so. I may be wrong. I think you're right, though. I'm not arguing against you. I think you're right. I just think the players don't value it.
You said top 10 players, right? So there's so many. There's so many players that are not.
The vast majority, but most of them think they will.
Yeah.
Would you agree that most people think that? Would you agree that most players have a highly inflated view of themselves because they have a high school coach, a handler, a mama, a daddy who says you should be doing what he's doing, and you should be drafted third overall when they suck.
I don't think most people that go to Vanderbilt or Mississippi State thought that way. No.
Okay.
In the SEC,
but if you're a bigger school, yes.
Well, I'll say any SEC program, if 70 plus of your kids don't think they're going to the NFL, you've recruited the wrong kids. I mean, they all think that. On some level, they think they can make it.
Yeah.
And they're reinforced by the fact that Jacksonville States and Ball States continue to put out NFL players every year. So you don't even have to be the best player at Ohio State to make it to the league. You can be at a no-name school and still make it.
And I would say the number of people blowing up these guys' egos has greatly increased now that you've opened up this NIL thing and brought collectives into it. I mean, is somebody that might not have been told 20 years ago that, you're a first-round pick, now I'm guaranteeing you they're being told that by someone. Because there's just too many people with something to be gained by bringing them in.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Let's move on to that. Thanks for the question, Jason. Next, we have John Tilson. Does UT football have a general manager? Do they need one? I think it's funny that the term, I remember when player personnel director came in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that just makes this sound like pro sports. And now general manager is out there.
Right.
Yeah. Do they call that? They've got a guy who does this, but is it GM? Well, I forget what's the name.
They don't have a general manager internally. This is that. I'm glad this came
got
up.
A player development guy.
So Tennessee has a different structure in their recruiting office. They have a director of player personnel, a director of scouting. Sometimes the director of player personnel is the guy that oversees all recruiting efforts. In this case, Tennessee's got a few guys that kind of divide different things. So this is the most overblown story, though. It comes up all the time. People have seen what Bill Belichick did. He brought in a big-name guy that worked with him in the NFL, Michael
Lombardi.
Stanford.
As a Patriots fan.
Yeah.
Michael Lombardi.
And so bringing in Michael Lombardi as general manager, and some other schools have used this title, too, has made people think, well, why doesn't Tennessee do that? Why don't other schools do that? The problem is the general manager is the head coach in the college game. He just is. So Josh Heupel is your general manager. Whether anyone wants to see it that way or not, that's the reality. There are other people involved in the decisions that go into how NIL money is divvied up and things like that. But that's not something that falls on one person, and even hiring someone with that title wouldn't change things that much.
Well, exactly. All these schools have a different org chart, if you will. I mean, it even goes to the coaching staff where this guy's pass game coordinator. Another school may just have your offensive coordinator and they don't divide it. So many of those titles are unique to a school. I'm guessing if you went around the SEC, you wouldn't see that all 16 schools are set up the same way. I'm guessing there's several setups across the conference. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that one.
I think it's really about being able to delegate responsibility, right? That's what it comes down to. This sounds good. On the other side, coaches' time is getting more and more valuable because there's so much more demands on their time. With all of these different deadlines. Look at the teams that made the first round of the college football playoffs. They couldn't even really focus 100% on the game coming up because there were all these other things going on with recruiting. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons
the
I
calendar's
think
idiotic.
Yeah, that's one reason I could see if you had somebody you could pass it off to at certain times, maybe it does, and that might already be a plus.
But you're right. Bill Belichick's taken Lombardi everywhere with him. I mean, he's kind of attached to the hip, and I'm sure he trusts him like crazy. But next year, if Bill Belichick's still around to be coaching in a bowl, he hasn't jumped to the NFL yet, and he's having to do they're in a playoff game, and he's getting ready for the playoffs, he's not going to trust Michael Lombardi to run the thing.
Right.
None of them. They're all two-hand. Nick Saban may have a general manager. Nick Saban wouldn't trust anybody to do it but him.
Bill Belichick, they thought wasn't going to get an NFL job because he wanted control over player personnel. Now that he's at a college program, people think he's not the one running the show, calling all the shots on evaluations. Of course he is. All these head coaches are ultimately in charge of who is on scholarship and who is not and who they want.
We can break this up with a basketball question, or we could jump straight to the next NIL-related question. Where do you want to go? We'll get back to basketball. You're going to keep it all in one thing? You're going to do another NIL?
Sure. All right. Go for it.
Will you explain how Spire Sports and the Volunteer Club works? We got 3 minutes. Can you handle it? And where the entertainment fee added on to season tickets goes.
Well, is this talking about the talent fee? I'm assuming the talent fee is what this is referencing. So the Spire and any other collective that you hear about is essentially a privately owned business that has been set up for the purpose of paying players through NIL, essentially.
They go out, they collect money, they try and raise funds, collect it,
from donors,
and then pass it on while taking supposedly just 10%. But their books aren't open, so nobody knows if they're keeping 10% or 90%.
And I know you love this, but
it drives me crazy. And the fact that it's not tax deductible, where a gift to the school is. So you're asking people, now I'm not going to show you how much of your money I'm going to keep. But give it to me, and it's not tax deductible. And people go, all right. I just find that amazing. So everybody does it.
This is one of the reasons people are eager to see this turn into revenue sharing if it gets to that point and as part of the House settlement. So we'll see if it gets to that point. But that would bring a lot of this in-house. I think you would still probably have some NIL.
You've still got NIL on top of it, though.
But it would not be where most of the money would come from maybe in that scenario. So I guess we'll see if it ever gets to that point. But right now, that's the setup. It's a privately owned business. It's not pay for play. They write up contracts for players, but that's what they're doing. They're raising money from donors and essentially distributing it to players through a variety of different deals. And each deal is different. Each player's situation can be totally different from all his other teammates. So that's what they're doing, and that's one of the things that you can discuss it in the recruiting process as the
lawsuit just got settled. The state of Tennessee versus NCAA.
So
and Virginia jumped in there as well.
So that's an active part of the recruiting process, and that plays a big role in where these guys are going.
And then on top of that, now you have Danny White saying, we're going to add another, what is it?
Right.
10%.
10%. 6% on basketball, 6% ticket increase.
And I know
and then 10% talent fee.
So the talent fee, where that's coming from is the expectation that there is going to be revenue sharing. And if there is revenue sharing, you're talking about they've proposed around $20 million that would be distributed to players in all sports. How that would be divvied up would be determined by potentially conferences. potentially each school. The SEC has talked about a standard level that would go to football, a standard amount that would go to men's basketball, and then and the rest would go to all other sports.
Which will be challenged as a salary cap immediately by someone, and it will be struck down.
So we're highly skeptical this will go into effect as it's been discussed.
Either a Title IX challenge or.
But what do you want to? But Tennessee isn't going to walk back that 10% talent fee.
Yeah, so that's
it's there whether this House thing goes or not.
So that's where the talent fee is coming from, is the expectation that you're going to have this extra expense of $20 million every single year. The flip side of that is people could say, well, couldn't you just cut $20 million out of your budget and pay for it that way? You could, but then you got to cut salaries and positions, and no one wants to do that. Or do fewer expansion projects and improvements and things like that. No one wants to do that.
You got to hire a general manager. My gosh, that costs money. Here's the thing, too, and I may be wrong about this, but when the college football goes, or college athletics, when they go to revenue sharing, it's going to lessen the impact of the collectives.
Yes, you hope.
Because if I got $1 million and you say, I'm going to give $1 million to the university so they can pay them in the revenue, or I'm going to give it to a collective which takes at least 10%, and it's not tax deductible.
Not tax deductible, yeah.
But my donation to the university is, then I don't think the collectives are going to raise as much money.
No,
they're going to have less impactful.
Even if the current system stays in place, there's serious concern about donor fatigue because of the desire every year to have. I mean, if you're talking $20 million every year, that's a lot of money. And it's not tax deductible. You keep going back to the same people a lot of the times because the average fan that's contributing $50 a month, that's not accounting for most of this. You're mostly having to go to the millionaire and billionaire donors.
Well, like people like Chuck, millionaires. Let me go to my richest man in town here.
Okay, hit the lottery, boys.
Yeah. So Chuck, I come to you as the University of Tennessee, and I say I need you to give money to the volunteer athletic scholarship fund. Okay. Then Spire Sports comes, and they say, or the volunteer club, whatever they're calling it. Chuck, I need you to give money here. Okay. And then Danny White comes back to the university and says, oh, by the way, we're upgrading our facilities again. We need more money here. I just wonder, at what point do you say, I've only got so much money, boys. You are a super fan. You're the biggest fan here. Right. You're the fan here. What is there a line, or do you just keep bleeding green for your orange?
I think somebody says enough's enough, right? I think they say, you got to draw the line somewhere. And I think that's what the season ticket holders, the donors, or whoever eventually will say. Enough's enough. I can give this month, but you can only squeeze so much blood out of a turnip or whatever. I don't have any more to give right now.
An interesting subplot to all of this that I don't know if people have thought about too much. If this does get to revenue sharing, then you're talking about money coming from a public university in most cases going to players, which would be accessible, you would think, by a Freedom of Information request. So then this money becomes all of a sudden publicly available, and every player in the locker room would also know what it is. So the dynamics that come with that and the shifts that come with that, and suddenly if you've got to go out and get a freshman and spend $500,000 to get this guy out of high school, and you've got a starter on your team making $150,000, that's a problem suddenly. So how that all works is going to be fascinating.
And one more thing real quick. The more you give, the more you expect. If I'm giving a 10% talent fee, don't I expect like that talent to produce? No.
Well, I noticed they didn't bring out a 10% talent fee when they were going 3-7. I mean, that's the trick, though. You better you better not have a backslide. A 6-6 season where everybody gets hurt, it's a bad year, just things happen.
Right.
It's a blip. But a 6-6 season now, oh my Lord, the reaction to that.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. Or those seasons where you play Florida and Alabama on the road and you got Georgia here and say you don't win all three. And then something else happens. You're looking at 8-4. People aren't going to be jumping down ready to have a parade down Gay Street, are they?
Ryan, we've talked about this, which it fascinates me. I expected everybody in the roster would know what everybody else is making already. You made me aware of the fact that, no, it's really kind of within a position group. And you didn't, this is already out there.
Yeah.
But you look at the offensive line situation just before last year where John Campbell got a raise, and then you had other people going, well, wait a second. If he's getting a raise, where's my raise? And then you got Gerald Mincy. It's like, you ain't getting a raise. You can go somewhere else. But that is within, I'm surprised it doesn't leak out past the position group. But you already see it within a position group. That's a good example of, now imagine if everybody on the team knows this guy's getting X and this guy's not. How are they going to look at, for example, the Nico thing? Everybody talks about $8 million. All right, I'm guessing the players know that that's talked about. How are they looking at it? Did Nico look like and then he just got a raise, apparently, you would think, this offseason because his daddy was flirting, putting stuff out on social media, and then all of a sudden why are you all worried? Well, because you've been tweeting craziness. But the interesting thing is, what do you think the players are thinking? If you're sitting there and you're like, man, I just had a hell of a year. This guy's getting that kind of money and a raise? It is a very different dynamic. And you've mentioned a few times that fans don't like this. Fans aren't used to it. Yeah, and that's part of it. Yeah.
That's the part of this that is difficult for players to even navigate. Is if it's not openly being discussed among your clique on the team. It's an 85-man locker room. You're not friends with everybody on that team.
Right.
So that's why it's not within every position group, but you might know what a guy at your position or someone else on the team really well. You might know what they make, but do you know what 25, 30 other players are making? Probably not. So, and technically, I think there's some non-disclosure clauses in a lot of guys' deals too, where they're not supposed to be discussing it. Doesn't stop it. Again, are you going to take your own player to court for violating
and like a player's not going to tell another player. An 18-year-old isn't going to have one or two too many.
So some players, it's probably a poorly kept secret what they make. Other players, it might be less.
How do you avoid a fractured locker room?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Very hard.
I'll credit Heupel, though, because the culture seems to be one thing he's killed it with.
Yeah.
They've got good culture. So that is a great question, though. I don't know how. I expected it to be more fractured.
Well, in the NFL, I've even talked to NFL players that say there's some jealousy within the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, if there's it's going to be in college.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And it's going to probably be worse, in particular when some of them find out what the other guy's making, which means, transfer portal.
Especially in
more money or transfer portal.
In this kind of environment too, where you're talking the difference between maybe $3-4 million for the top end guys compared to 5 figures for the guys at the lower end of the spectrum. It's a big disparity.
We were talking about players getting paid and everything. You had an interesting point you brought up on my show a couple of weeks ago. You talked to some folks who said players really don't want to be. This floored me. That you had talked to somebody who said players do not want to, or maybe you talked to players who said they don't want to be paid because they don't want to pay taxes.
They don't want to be employees.
Don't want to be employees because they don't want to pay taxes.
So I interviewed Jemai Meshack. I interviewed Tamari Key at the SEC spring meetings the year before. And I asked them, actually it was in the year before, May of 2024. And I said, do you want to be employees? And now they are the leaders among a leadership group in the SEC. And they said, absolutely not. We don't want to be employees. I said, why not? Because we don't want to get taxed on our scholarship. So that was their opinion. They do not want to be employees.
Yeah.
And they were speaking for a group of SEC leadership athletes at the SEC spring meetings.
Aren't they paying self-employment tax on their NIL money?
They are on that, but they don't want to be. They don't want to also have to pay.
Right.
If your scholarship is worth $75,000 at Vanderbilt, they don't want to pay 28% tax on that.
To the average
so they don't want to be employed.
To the average player who's not making a lot of money, that is a big deal. So.
But if we're talking about revenue sharing where they're all going to be making a lot more money, it's like I'm going to make more even taking the taxes out, unless you're a little guy.
Yeah, well,
and there are a lot of those.
Yes.
See, that's the flip side.
That's another interesting risk.
Yes.
Hell, we want to be employees. And I mean, you got groups that are going around trying to unionize at different schools.
Mm-hmm. Was it Dartmouth?
Dartmouth, I think Northwestern tried at one point.
Yeah.
It is another fracture point that some of these kids are like, I want $1 million a year. Tax me all you want. And somebody who's not getting that would be like, I don't want to be taxed on my $75,000 scholarship.
Well, that's like
that's
talking about getting the lottery. The $1 million turns into what? Turns into $650,000.
Yeah.
So there is a difference there.
The thing that if you make them employees,
I'll still take the million.
I know.
If you make them employees, though, then you're getting a cut of the TV money, and then you're talking more money for everybody. So that's the big difference there. If you get them to be employees, it opens up the floodgates.
Which is the reason the schools don't want to, because they don't want to split the TV money.
Nope.
It's the TV money is the key.
Yep.
TV. If you look at all this stuff, and if you're sitting there going, I hate all this, it's the TV money.
Mm-hmm.
It all goes back to 1984. The Oklahoma-Georgia case when they sued and they said, well, we all have to be able to cut our own TV deals. And you can draw a direct line through all the conference realignment. All these changes have gone back to that one court decision in 84. I forget what was the name of that court case. Maybe it was just Georgia and Oklahoma versus the NCAA. But
I like that.
It was the CFB case, basically. Yeah. Tell you what, before we get to some more of these, it's halftime, talk. So I want to thank the folks at Hearthside Bank. And I'll turn and I will talk to this camera here. Hearthside Bank, fantastic partner for you. Partner in terms of banking. There's at least one financial institution in town that I know of that has replaced their tellers. You don't go inside anymore and talk to a human being. It's monitors. If you're looking for personal banking, someone who really cares about whether or not you are able to buy that boat, you are able to hit that retirement at X age, you have enough to have a secure retirement. That's Hearthside Bank. I've dealt with them. They are good people. They are all over Southeast Kentucky, all over East Tennessee. HearthsideBank.com to learn more. And if you're here in East Tennessee where we are in Knoxville, they've even got a branch in Farragut. Hearthside Bank. All right, gentlemen, let's get to a basketball question. This is from Cardell Duffield. Duffield? My apologies, Cardell. It's Cardell. I'll say Cardell Duffield. First off, love the show. Thank you. Secondly, I would love to get everyone's opinion on Chaz Lanier not creating or generating offense when his shot isn't falling. I know he's a shooting guard, but averaging 1.1 assist is wild, not to mention tonight against Kentucky. That was a Kentucky game. He had 0 assists. Great players get involved in the game in other ways when they struggle, and I don't see that in him. I would like to see him get to the basket, drive, dish, pick and rolls. Zakai is doing everything, and you need some help. Thoughts on Chaz Lanier not being much more than a good shooter at times?
Rick Barnes wants all of his players, if you're a shooter, he wants you to still impact the game with assists, rebound, defense, whatever. If you're Jemai Meshack and you're having trouble scoring, but you can play great defense, you can get rebounds, you can be effective maybe in a pick and roll. You want to be able to impact the game if you're not just scoring. And right now, Lanier, that's the main thing that he does. And that's one of the things that Barnes is trying to get Lanier to do is branch his game out. Yeah. Have an impact when you're not hitting threes or mid-range jumpers.
But especially if you're in like a 2 for 30 slump, right? Yeah. If you're missing, and then we've heard the announcers say that. Jimmy Dykes has said that. Mm-hmm. Where's a pump fake? Where's a move to just facilitate more, to make the pass? One thing I've noticed about the Chaz Lanier, though, I don't think his personality kind of fits taking on this role of being the superstar scorer. I mean, he's from Nashville area, but at North Florida, he gradually improved, right, and had a really good the last year there. But until then, it was like he just burst on the scene. Mm-hmm. Well, now all of a sudden, he's going to SEC gyms and arenas he's never been to before. He's the focus of the defense. So there's a lot that goes into this, but I think it's a great question. And yes, I think he does need to do more.
Cardell.
I think he does need to do more, and we've seen it.
I think this is where Tennessee's roster overall has some limitations. They don't have many guys who are great at creating their own shots. I think they have a lot of stand-up shooters, spot-up shooters, and then Zakai Ziegler's the one guy who can kind of break things down, get inside, and dish it back out to somebody sometimes. And too much is on his shoulders in the games where they're struggling offensively. It seems like he's the only guy that can break down a defense and make something happen outside of a perimeter pass.
And Barnes was even on him. But we want you to make a shorter cut when you're coming off a screen, just so you have a little bit more. He's got such a quick release, but he was not. He was rounding it off. So there's several aspects to the game. That's why I even wondered a little bit, John, at Vanderbilt, that's who you went to at the end of the game to take it to the bucket and try and make the winning basket to send it into overtime. But that's really not his. That hadn't been his game.
Of course, everybody did complain though a couple of weeks later when Zakai Ziegler got the last shot.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody who talked to someone at UT who told them that the reason Zakai got that last shot. What game was that?
Auburn.
Yeah, the Auburn
right
game.
Corner.
Yep. Why he got that shot, and not somebody else, was anybody else who'd taken that shot and not hit it would have gone in the tank for 3 days. Whereas Zakai, I missed it and can move on, which I think speaks to the confidence level for Chaz Lanier. I think Lanier suffers from Dalton Connect effect. Yeah. Everybody thinks that Dalton Connect was, well, you're just bringing a new Connect, and this guy's a shooter, and he looked good shooting against teams early that were kind of the level of North Florida. Yeah. I mean, he was lighting up that preseason, which was not exactly the most dangerous preseason that Barnes has ever scheduled. And everybody thinks you're going to be the next Connect, and I think that gave it a false sense. It's like, not everybody's going to be Dalton Connect.
No.
Dalton Connect didn't belong where he was. Chaz Lanier may have been better off And I'm not saying he's not a good college basketball player, but he might have been more comfortable at North Florida. He's a guy that I almost wish had a second year.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if he wouldn't be better next year after a year of – is he one of those guys that does the transfer and would hit on the second year as opposed to the first year?
I'm interested to see the second half of his season.
Yeah.
Also. Because the other day he was 5 for 9 on threes.
Right.
Not every
He
year
was
is
excellent.
Not every year is there even going to be a Dalton Connect in the transfer portal. That was such a unique thing. People can't expect that.
Well, the fact that he wound up where he did is just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable. And kudos to Barnes for letting him come in, and Barnes let him do his thing too. I mean, Barnes changed his
We're
style.
paying you to score.
That was a heck of a comment. I think we might have another one here. Hang on a second. Let's see. I thought we had one. I thought I had somebody that said that about Chaz Lanier somewhere in here. Oh, here we go. Yeah. This is from James Grills. James Grills. Yeah, that's right. I was wondering about what Coach Rick Barnes said a few weeks ago about Lanier. He needs to start doing what he's being paid for. The question is, are we now watching semi-pro games, and can the players be fined for poor performance or misconduct or a technical foul? Just wondering. You could do it.
Good luck with
They're
that,
going to
too.
leave.
Yeah.
They're going to hit the portal.
There are some schools that have tried to find players. You can try it. Like you said, it's probably going to make players want to leave in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But
And then good luck trying to recruit people into
Yeah.
your program. Oh, that coach does that to them? You don't want to go there.
Right.
So there's a difference in the recruiting in college versus the pro athlete in the NBA.
and
You're locked in on a contract.
Yeah, it's not just a slippery slope. That's going off like the mountainside. And here's the thing: conduct detrimental to the team.
Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, maybe I could see something there. But if you go 1 for 12 shooting, or if you just happen to have a bad night, no, there's no way you're going to do that.
I would do that over.
that,
No, you're not going to get that over a technical foul or something.
Right.
You know, that would be, well, Jimmy Butler. I'm not playing tonight for the next 3 weeks. I'm out. What was I going to say? Something popped into my head there. So much of this though could be and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. How much of this could just be fixed with contracts? If they were just employees. I know that some of them don't want to be. I know that schools don't want them to be. I know that the current settlement they're working on isn't going to hold up even if it passes. But boy, if you could get to the point where they are contracted, that's the worst thing about this is people say, well, it's like the pro game. No, it's worse than the pro game. Because the New England Patriots or the Boston Celtics or the Atlanta Braves, they're not going to lose their entire roster every offseason. You got guys who become free agents this year. You got 10 of your 53-man roster. And next year you got 8. And the next year you got 12. But you're worrying about 8, 10, 12. You're not worried about 53 all leaving at once. And to me, that is the biggest issue with this portal thing. And now that the Wisconsin kid's proving that the dates don't even matter on the portal, you don't even need the portal. I'm going anyway. And the NCAA's like, all right, we can't do anything.
Well, Deion Sanders ran off about 67 players, right?
Yeah, which is just
And then Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama, and at least 30 players left.
Yeah.
Right, because of the coaching change. 2 of them went to Ohio State. The center that won the Remington Award, and Caleb Downs, the first-team All-American.
Yeah.
So they're going all over the place with no restrictions.
Yeah.
You can be a free agent every year,
and
I don't like that system.
And the contract should go both ways. Yes, you can get a kid in there who can just be a punk and say, I'm going to eat pizza all day. You can get on the Pennington plan. I'm just going to sit around. I'm going to eat pizza. I'm going to watch movies. I don't need your practice. I'm just going to hang out. And that would suck.
Yep.
But just like in the NFL, you can get those guys. They're under contract.
Yeah.
So to me, you shouldn't be able to run off 67 kids. That's crap. Those guys got a deal. Coaches should have to live with it. On the other hand, players, you made a decision as an 18-year-old. You signed this paper. If you're 18-year-old and you go into the Army, they're not going to say, if you're at basic training, they're not going to say, well, he changed his mind, let him get out of here. You just better make a good decision. But it ought to be locked in on both directions.
Yeah.
And if you do that, all of this goes away.
Yep.
So 99% of this crap goes away.
that's what I've said. I said, we're going to find out in the coming years, do coaches and administrators hate this system enough to give up some of the money that has made everything possible for them, because that's ultimately what, if you want your life to be easier, make them employees. But no one wants to do that because they don't want to give up the TV money.
Employees and the cost of scholarship is tax exempt.
Yep.
All right. Here's the next one. Jason Vowell. I think that's Vowell. It may be Vowell. Sorry. The question I want to ask is, how long does it take to prepare for each week's Sports Source show? Enjoy watching it each week. Thank you.
I'll answer that.
Yeah. It doesn't take much time at all, does it?
15, 20 minutes, right?
I'll give you an example of football season, and I'll be quick about it. I usually start with a yellow legal pad, and I will get 4 or 5 page deep in notes. And then you take that legal pad and you start whittling it down, and I try to get to about 10 topics. And there are times where this topic can fit with this topic. So it's like, oh, this is like a 1 and 1A, so this is perfect. I can get kind of an 11th topic in there. But you go with 10 topics, and then you lay those out. And then you figure out, all right, I've got these 9 guys on the show. And there are questions that superfan Chuck, he'll be fired up about that. I'll give him that. There are ones that superfan Sterling, all right, I'm not going to give that to Sterling because he's not going to give me anything honest. He's going to be Mr. Pro UT. There are other things where you give it exactly to Sterling. It's like, all right, if you're a player, what's this been like? Yeah. So you got to figure out that. And then all these guys, I try and give them about the same number of slots. So it's the toughest part is the jigsaw puzzle of trying to figure. And it's why when somebody calls in I don't know if somebody's sick, that's one thing. But when guys bail out at the last second, oh man, that's where the voodoo dolls come out. But that's the tough thing because everybody has, and it's silly as this is, I try and when we put you guys out there's 5 chairs. I try not to ever have a segment where you're in the 4th chair and the next segment you're in the 1st chair. So I got to keep these guys in here and then move in different guys, keep everybody with the same amount of segments kind of. That's the tough part. So that's why in a football game, I hate night games. Yeah. Hate them because I'm up till 5 a.m. for a night game. And then the beauty is the number of people who will tell me they think we just sit down and wing it. And I tell myself, no, that means you produced it well. If they think you just wing it. But anyway, it's a little more work than people would think.
Yeah, and I don't know if people at home can tell, but John deserves a lot of credit for the research that you do on some of these topics, the stats you dig up. You do a really good job with that.
Thank you. Next question.
But also
we don't need to get into the
but that also doesn't account for the time spent on building sets and things like that people might not think about. There's a lot of work that goes into you've had a new intro to the show like every year. And there's a lot of background work beyond just that.
Let's get off the.
Well, this real quick.
Thank you, Jason.
He can do all of this work, and there can be a technical glitch out of his control. Yeah. And that's what I just wish a lot of fans, viewers at home would realize.
Or occasionally, somebody could ask me to do a show at Smokies Park. And you're trying to be good, and you're blown away in a windstorm, and you didn't set it up. All right. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you watching the show. But all these guys do a great job. I do want to say that. It's a fun, good mix of people. It always has been. It used to just be, when it started, man, we had a number of people. Then the group really solidified with you, Mike Strange, and Bob Hodge. And that was 9 out of every 10 shows it was us. Then Josh Ward came in as kind of the next guy. Then we've expanded more and more. And part of it, the football shows are locked in. And I try and get the guys spread out throughout the rest of the year. I love having you on. The tough thing is getting you because of recruiting. It's you're part of the year you can do it, part of the year you can't. Jimmy, since you've retired, nobody ever sees you anymore since you've retired. But I try not to. I try to only use you 2-3 times a week. And Chuck, I have to keep you away. We put locks on the door.
I show up even when I'm not supposed to.
Chuck just shows up on the set and sits in there in the dark.
I'll be the stage manager.
All right, I think we got. Let's see. Last question. All right, Randy Richardson. College football format. I am 100% against on-campus first-round games.
Ooh.
Reward. You made the top 12. Oh, forgot to tell you, you get another road game if you lose and there's no bowl game. Okay. Road wins in major college football are extremely hard to come by. Ask Alabama going to an average Oklahoma and being spanked. Play all college football playoff games in bowls. Even bowls like the Citrus and the one in Tampa were half full with SEC Big Ten matchups. Utilize those and fill them up. Better for fans of the lower seeded schools as well. Just my 2 cents. Randy, I appreciate you sending that. Couldn't disagree more.
Yeah, it depends on what you value more. Do you value the competitive balance of giving everyone a shot to win, or do you value more the experience of having an on-campus game? I've found more people saying, I'd rather have these games on campus. The playoff games at bowl sites feel too sterile.
Perfect. Antiseptic.
Yeah, give me the games at Ohio State, and if Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee get to host playoff games in the future, that's going to be awesome. That's what people want to see with college football.
Yeah, I mean, if SMU had come to Tennessee, I don't think Tennessee fans would be complaining about. And I don't know that Randy Richardson is a Tennessee fan, but I don't think Vol fans would have a problem with home playoff games if the seeding hadn't been goofy and you wound up with a home game, which you should have.
Here would be my problem: is who gets those automatic seeds. Just based on the conference. Yep. If you win a conference that could be widely agreed is a lesser conference, you do not deserve one of those coveted 4 first-round buys.
Here's another thought about this. If you were a bowl and you're used to having a game January 1st or December 31st, do you want to host a bowl game December 20th?
Right.
No.
Big difference. And I mean,
do you move the whole season back because you'd have to if you want to?
Yeah. As far as maximizing the bowl games attendance stuff, the point's valid. Bowl game attendance is going to be a concern, I think, in the years to come because bowls have been watered down.
Oh, they're useless. It took 3 days into bowl season. After the playoffs were announced, it took me 3 days to go look at the bowl list. I forgot about it. Yep. I just didn't. Usually it's like, who plays it? I didn't even look. I was like, Illinois, South Carolina, 3 days after it was announced.
If you're a fan of a playoff team, the bowls are just out of mind. You don't even care. So it's, how to maximize the bowl system, that would make more sense. But I would say to his question, give teams, get a higher seed. This is a reward for being a top 8 seed. I like that a team like, say, Ohio State, they kind of messed around this year. If they'd ended up in a 12 seed or an 11 seed, it's a different story for them. So I kind of like that it makes the regular season matter more. You want that home game. It's a big difference.
I would be okay. The dome stuff to me sucks. It just stinks. I don't like watching football games in domes if I'm there. I don't like watching football games in domes on TV. I hate the fact that, to me, it's like, I don't know how many of you guys ever had electric football games.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like I'm watching. The green is too perfect. I despise it. It's just so I'm watching the Peach Bowl, and I'm sitting there thinking, is this Atlanta Peach Bowl or is this the Fiesta Bowl? Because it looks the same.
Yep. Yeah.
It looks the same. Now, if you told me we're going to play them all in bowls, but the semifinals every year will be at the Orange Bowl outside and the Rose Bowl, the greatest venue, and that's the most beautiful bowl game venue, period, I could live with that.
Yep.
But by gosh, I do not want to see wall-to-wall, we're now at the, what's the Indiana Dome now? What is the RCA Dome?
RCA Dome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building. It's just like watching a football game in a giant armory.
Now, I like the experience in person. I think on TV it plays really boring. I think that's to your point. It feels like what the NCAA tournament has done to the courts all being the same, which is so boring.
Yeah, I do too.
It feels the same way
like the college.
Yeah, it feels the football version of that is having this generic background of domes and green fields.
And here's what I would say.
Exactly.
That the system they have right now, the 12 teams, it may not be perfect, but it's better than what they had.
Oh,
right? And you can still, but to answer the question, but you can still tweak it maybe a little bit, but it's still better than what you have. And if you want, like Ryan says, it's up to get one of those best. Can you imagine how crazy Knoxville would have been?
Oh,
Tennessee and Indiana in a first round playoff game.
When we get to see that, it'll be like nothing people have ever seen before, and that's what you want. Like that's what college football ought to be if it's going to have a playoff like that.
Yeah. The thing is, I think it's gotten. I don't know that it is better. I was okay with 4 because typically the semifinals were always blowouts anyway. I just don't think there's more than 3 teams that really deserve it. Ohio State and Notre Dame both got there, and they wouldn't have been in the playoff this year. I get that. The people are like, see? Well, okay. There's also been years in the NCAA tournament where Florida Gulf Coast, where George Mason goes to the Final Four. George Mason, if they'd played in a big conference, was that really one of the 4 best teams in the country? So what you're looking at is the NCAA tournament, and the college football. The more it grows, the more it's becoming like the NCAA tournament. NCAA tournament is a fantastically entertaining way to decide a champion. Is it a horribly unfair way to do it because I don't think it's accurate.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well, some years it may not be.
I think most years you.
Well, UConn was the best team in the country last 2 years.
UConn's the best team, but who did they play all the way through? Sometimes your Final Four aren't the four best.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. Where you're going to get some of that, but in an NFL, for example, the teams are so even in the pros. You only play you play 16 games. The teams are very closely rated from top to bottom. Best team to the worst team. It's not like you get in college. That's a huge divide in those 130 teams in football.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're talking about expanding the NCAA basketball tournament now. Again, they keep talking about it. They're going to do it. I just think it's wildly entertaining. There's no question. It is. It's fantastic to watch. I just don't think it really declares the true champion.
Every year, yeah.
Yeah, every year. I mean, I prefer the NBA and a 7-game series. Harder to pull an upset, But that's also telling me if somebody does pull it, oh man, they did their work. They earned this. If you just get hot on a night in the NCAA tournament, or if you just have one night where you fumbled 3 times in the first round of the playoffs and you were the number 1 team and you lost to the number 12 seed or 16 seed, which is what it's going to be someday.
Yeah.
I don't know that it needs 14 and 16 teams. I don't think the 16th team deserves a shot at the national championship in football.
But that's where it's going.
Yeah.
I generally agree, but I hope it doesn't go beyond 16. There's no need for it to be ever 24. 32.
Isn't that what it is at
32 in FCS?
Yeah, 32.
I believe that's still the number, right?
Well, here's the thing. Do you make more money with 32 than 16? I thought it was 24, but
you may be right.
But do you make more money with 24 than 16? Yes. Yeah. So they'll do it.
Probably so. That's
all. It's just where's the most money. That's what they're going to do. I mean, they're doing it with the NCAA tournament. Did it need to go to 68 teams from 64? Does it need to go to 72 or 76? No.
If ESPN wants something else to put on the air, if ESPN needs more inventory for us to watch, if we're not going to watch anything else,
and
that's where the money is, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Jimmy Hyams, Chuck Cavalaris, Ryan Callahan. Jimmy, you can catch on the Sports Source. Chuck, you can catch on the Sports Source. You're also, full disclosure, you and Paige Dower doing a great job with your own YouTube channel.
We just interviewed Jim Haslam.
About Neyland, correct?
About General Neyland, that's right. And Trevor Bain. So those are our next 2 ventures.
Terrific. You can find them right on YouTube. Just click around. Once you click through all the Sports Source Digital Network. And Ryan, Go Vols 24/7. You were on the show this past Sunday. Are you going to be on this Sunday?
Not this Sunday.
Okay.
Nope.
Well, then you can't see him this Sunday. I don't know when you're going to be watching this. You may watch this 3 years
on, but I'll show up.
He'll show up. I'll have to. Chuck, let me in. Thanks for watching this. Send us questions. SSDN questions, Sports Source Digital Network questions @gmail.com. Check out the Sports Source if you're in WATE's viewing area. That's 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings, 90 minutes every Sunday year-round. If you want to check out that show on YouTube, go to my other YouTube channel, which is just Sports Source. I think it's @SportsSource3880. But you can just search Sports Source. It pops up. But check out and subscribe to the Sports Source Digital Network. We've got all kinds of shows up there of different types. We got soccer. We got sports gambling. We've got Vols in the pros. We've got countdowns of great Vol games and players and that kind of thing. Look around and do us a favor, subscribe. Subscribe if you like the content, but it also helps people out there. YouTube likes that, and they'll say, hey, you're a Tennessee fan. Maybe you'll like this channel. So this is built, we call it a Tennessee thing. If you look at the little logo when we open, it's built for people who are outside the market too. We obviously, Tennessee fans like this here in East Tennessee, but I've lived outside. When I was a kid growing up as a Tennessee fan, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was pre-internet. You didn't have a radio station that was in the Vol network over there.
Yeah.
We would order the Knoxville News Sentinel and have it delivered 2 days later. And it would arrive, and it was like Christmas going through that. This is for those people who are in Hackensack and Butte, Montana, on a military base in Japan. This is their way to connect back, feel a little piece of home. So if you subscribe, if you comment, give us your thoughts on these questions. If you like it, if you hit notify, all that helps other people find us. And we thank you. See you next time on the Q&A show here on the Sports Source Digital Network.